Dear anti-corruption fighters, welcome back. I can see that you're coming back from lunch and the flow is there, so hopefully you will gather more and more of you. Those who are here, have you managed to have lunch? Anyone who has managed to have lunch? Not that many. Well, there will be coffee breaks after the plenary, and who knows, maybe you did have a very full breakfast and everything's fine. But anyway, the previous panel went a little longer, so this way the break got shortened, but hopefully that everything will resume on time. We will start this plenary on time and we will finish on time as well. And I will ask you one more question, and I'm not pretending to be a teacher and you the students, but this is for us to get the vibe of the whole idea, of the whole event. And I'm about to ask you if you're planning to attend the celebration evening tonight. If you could raise your hands, whoever is planning. Okay, some of you. And I will take this chance to just remind everybody that there is one. At 7:30 at Hall 1. We'll celebrate the longest day and shortest night. There are traditional celebrations in Lithuania. We actually have a day off on Monday, I think it is, but we will celebrate it tonight since we will move to the 21st of June, which is the longest day and shortest night, solstice celebration. So everything is included, music, food, and drinks. So do attend it. It will be fun, and you can do lots of networking as well. So this is a gentle reminder to do it. We'll move to the plenary on ending impunity, from prevention to enforcement. We will get mostly the law enforcement perspective during this panel. You will be hopefully also able to ask questions, and it is my honor to introduce the moderator of this session, who is, I know, behind me, and he's chair of Istanbul Anti-Corruption Action Plan, and interestingly enough, he's a former FIFA referee. So he will hopefully say a couple of more words about that, and then he will go into the law enforcement and the ending the impunity issue. So let's welcome on stage, first of all, Drago Kos and the rest of the panel by giving them a big round of applause. Thank you so much.
Well, for sure, let's say what you just heard, that I used to be FIFA referee, is an assurance that we will end on time, because that's an important match is starting right afterwards, where my country is playing, so we will have to stop on time. So we collected together, let's say, top officials from the law enforcement, because law enforcement is the one which always faces the, let's say, the worst features of corruption. And expectations against the law enforcement today are increasing, while they're facing more and more difficulties around the world. Not only, let's say, that there are not very many politicians who like law enforcement to be very effective, especially not when it comes to fighting high-level corruption. There are always problems with resources for law enforcement, always problems with staff, equipment, and so on and so on. And if you add to that, let's say, the current challenges which are out there today, and we can just list them. Let's say we have world superpowers fighting for global supremacy. We are facing, let's say, terrible cases of terrorism, war crimes, and genocide. We are facing the rise of authoritarian regimes in some European and Latin American countries, which of course pose a special challenge for the law enforcement colleagues which are facing those challenges, and simply they're being taken away from fighting corruption. So they have a hard job, and it's getting even harder. And today we will try to find out, let's say, the answers to the questions how, not how to make their work easier, but how at least how to ensure that they will stay as effective as they are now. because already that would be a challenge. Having in mind all the, let's say, the problems they're facing nowadays, keeping the current level of effectiveness, it is a challenge. And of course, through years, hopefully, the fighting corruption will again become the absolute priority for all of law enforcement officials around, well, specialized units around the world, and then we will see some results. We have results. We will also hear today how difficult it is to get to these results. And in answering to these questions, I have a really good panel today, composed of police investigators, prosecutors, of course, at the top levels, and they are, I will represent them now, not later. So we have with us Ms. Lisa Miller, who is Deputy Assistant Attorney General of Criminal Division, Department of Justice from the United States. Monica Mwansa, she's the Deputy Director General of Anti-Corruption Commission from Zambia. Céline Guillet, Deputy Head of the National Financial Prosecution Office from France. Veronica Dragalin, Chief of Anti-Corruption Prosecutor from the Anti-Corruption Prosecution Office of the Republic of Moldova. Catherine de Bolle, Executive Director of Europol. Isaac Kehinde Oginni, Director of Interpol's Financial Crime and Anti-Corruption Center. And last but not least, Mr. Andrés Ritter, Deputy European Chief Prosecutor from the EPPO. So you see, we really have the best possible panel. And yes, this deserves a big round of applause. The plan is the following: 2 rounds of questions, and then, of course, you will get the chances to ask your questions. And for the questions, I will sit down. I don't want to stick out from them. So, and we will start on this side. Lisa, the US DOJ is known to be very determined and persistent when it comes to fighting corruption and dealing with corruption cases. So, in your experience, what are the most important components of successful anti-corruption investigations and prosecutions that enable effective enforcement?
So first, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here with you and all of my fellow esteemed co-panelists on this stage. We sometimes say in America, where there's a will, there's a way. And I think that support from the highest levels of the United States government has been critical to our success. We also benefit from a strong legal framework, going back to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act of the 1970s era, but we also have robust money laundering authorities and others that I'll touch on later in my remarks. But I wanted to pick, if I had to pick just 6 things to focus on, 6 things that in my experience have been critical to our anti-corruption efforts and program. First is speed. Second is cross-border cooperation and coordination. Third is creating strong disclosure and reporting incentives through policies. Fourth is prosecution of individuals as well as authorities to prosecute corporations. Fifth is training and retaining investigators and prosecutors who are experienced, motivated, and empowered to do this important work. And 6 is having forfeiture and asset recovery capabilities to take the profit out of crime, even if individuals and companies are beyond the reach of other laws. So let me talk a little more in detail about each of these concepts. Speed is a little bit of a self-evident concept, but by their very nature, corruption investigations are complex and multinational. Evidence is located in multiple jurisdictions, and it can be time-consuming to investigate. So speed is our friend when it comes to gathering evidence, speaking to witnesses, and, of course, bringing the cases in the U.S. court system. So that brings me to my second component, which is cross-border cooperation, and that facilitates speed. It facilitates informal access to information and evidence located abroad, but of course we also ultimately use formal channels to obtain evidence as well. We rely on our strong bilateral and multilateral partnerships and growing global network of anti-corruption enforcers. And just last year, we announced yet another initiative to buttress foreign partnerships, the International Corporate Anti-Bribery, or ICAB initiative, where we have designated prosecutors from our Foreign Corrupt Practices Act unit focusing on key regions across the world to further amplify efforts that we've pursued for decades. Let me now pivot to incentives. I think that policy incentives have played a pivotal role. We have incentives for both corporations to self-report bribery offenses to the United States, as well as recently we've announced new incentives for individuals and whistleblowers to come forward to report crimes to the Department of Justice in return for the prospect of getting a percentage of a civil or criminal forfeiture at the end of a case. We, of course, develop cases through a variety of methods, but self-reports from companies as well as from whistleblowers and individuals have been key to identifying corruption schemes, and robust support of whistleblowing initiatives by companies is something that we seek to encourage and reward through our corporate policies. We, through these corporate policies, make what we call the business case for compliance, and we think that amplifies the efforts of our criminal prosecutions in court because it encourages companies to incentivize in measures that actually prevent corruption before it becomes a prolific problem. They identify and nip red flags in the bud early. Now, that's not going to be every company, but if we can have any success at all, that's a victory. We count it as a win. So we think any successful program has to have incentives for both corporate compliance and corporate self-reporting, as well as whistleblowers coming forward. And I mentioned our new program that offers money, but we also offer other rewards to individuals involved in schemes, such as the prospect of a declination of prosecution, or even a non-prosecution agreement. In the United States system, we allow cooperation, which means individuals to provide information in return for the prospect of a more beneficial sentence at the end of a case. Pivoting briefly to individual prosecutions and corporate liability, I think as a supplement to our policy, the fact that our law allows for the concept of what we call respondeat superior, where you can attribute liability to companies based on the acts of individuals, not just through policy, but through the fact of that legal concept. It encourages companies to root out corruption and corrupt actors within their own walls. And then just briefly, in the last two factors I mentioned, sophisticated and well-resourced investigators or prosecutors, it's something every country needs. None of us have enough resources, and each of us individually can't do it alone. But it brings me back to point one of where there's a will and a way, we can succeed together with grit and determination.
Thank you. And for those of you who are not here yet, when Lisa started, she said something which I think is really important. You said, where's the will, there's the way. Let us not forget that. Monica, politicians of all countries have a pressing need to interfere with the work of the law enforcement officials, especially their successful ones. So in some countries, this pressure is huge and direct, while in other countries, it's very polite, almost a cultural thing. What is your experience, personal or professional, with attempts of external political interference, and what do you think, what are the best deterrent tactics against such interference?
Thank you so much. Allow me to join the previous speakers in extending my gratitude to the Lithuanian government for hosting us at this conference. I also want to extend my gratitude to the IACC Council for inviting me to be part of this panel of great panelists. Let me also start by indicating that as Zambia, the Anti-Corruption Commission is currently enjoying the President's support with regard to the fight against corruption. We have been encouraged to recover the stolen assets as well as prosecute the perpetrators. We do feel the political will from the government of the day to fight corruption, both present and past. But even with that political will and support from the president, our work has not been without political interference. And because we have a mandate to fight both past and present corruption, I will share experiences on the kind of political interference we've experienced from the politicians who are put in the past corruption that we're fighting, as well as the present corruption. And indeed, like you said, this political interference can be direct or indirect. It can even be as polite as a call from a politician to say, well, Deputy Director General, I heard you were in Lithuania for a conference. How did it go? Oh, after a few pleasantries, now I'm told, okay, so now when are you closing up on those investigations? That is still political interference. Now, in sharing my experience, let me start with politicians from the previous government or the past government who ideally will fall in the category of the opposition. These ones, from experience, we've encountered some interference where when we are investigating them, they'll call us names. They will accuse us of being persecutors. They'll tell us it's just a witch hunt. All that is in an effort to actually intimidate us. But then, one thing I thought I need to emphasize is we will follow these as we look at past corruption, because these were the custodians to our public resources. They were the keys to the public funds. So when we receive reports of corrupt practices on them, we want to investigate and make them accountable with regard to how public funds were spent. So even when we'll be called persecutors, for prosecutors, the National Prosecution Authority, and for us as investigators, we're told it's just a witch hunt, you want to persecute us. We will still go ahead and investigate professionally because we want to hold them accountable with regard to how they spent their resources. And this category also, sometimes when we call them to our offices to interview them, many times they'll come with a mob of political sympathizers, the cadres, to make noise at our offices as we are interviewing them. That too can be intimidating. And of course, some of you could have experienced this challenge in your jurisdictions where the moment you just call them in confidence to ask about one or two things with regard to the investigations, they'll be the first ones to go to the media and actually start crying foul, to quickly seek for sympathy from the public even before we do our work as investigators. That is with regard to the politicians as we focus on fighting past corruption. Now, with regard to the present ones, the ones currently holding office, I will share a bit of an example that may be personal. So we are investigating this honorable minister, and the moment he's interviewed by our officers, he quickly calls to say, Deputy Director General, what's this I hear that you're investigating me? So what should I do? What came to my mind was to just advise him to cooperate. I quickly said, just cooperate, answer the questions as they are asked. A week later, what's happening to my case? When are you closing this? Because I think there's nothing I did. But if indeed there's nothing this politician did, why not let us do our work? After a month, I'm called again to say, okay, I've been trying to call you the whole week. Are you now about to arrest me? So I immediately responded to say, when we're about to arrest you, I'll actually be very happy to pick your call and tell you we're about to arrest you, because then we would have done our part. So the political interference from the present may be as good as that. With the two examples I've given, moving on to the second part of the question, how then can we address that? Or what are some of the best tactics we can put in place to ensure that we deter further interference politically? Some of the tactics we can actually make use of is the media. Work with the media as anti-corruption activists. Unfortunately for you and I, it's all about public perception. What message are we sending to the public? How are we communicating the efforts we're putting into the fight against corruption? When we work with the media, even in the example I gave from a personal perspective, while we're about to arrest this honorable minister, working with the media, we could easily go to the media and quickly give them the information. Not leak, but share the information so that they're the ones to quickly publish the arrest of that minister. The next time we receive a call, we'll be quick to say, oh, unfortunately, that's already in the media. There's nothing we can do. Just let us do our work. Another tactic we could work with is to make use of the bureaucracies in your institution. If you don't have, create imaginary ones. And by this I mean, even when, as an investigator, or as a prosecutor, or as a head of an institution, you receive a call that is actually interfering in the work that your institution is doing, you could easily say, at this point, I think I may not have much information on that. It should be in another office. When it comes to my desk, I'll see what I can do about that. As you are giving that explanation, attempting or trying to follow the purported bureaucracy, if you don't have it, or the actual bureaucracy, work is moving within your institution. By the time maybe you're reminded to say, what are you doing about my case? You would diplomatically be able to say, at this point, there's nothing I can do. We've concluded our work. It's beyond me. So the tactic that we can work with is to get to a point where we can now be able to respond and say, this is beyond me. I couldn't do anything, unfortunately. For the jurisdictions where investigation is separated from prosecution, you can try to delay your responses to the possible interference until you get to a point when you're able to say, at this point, it's with the National Prosecution Authority, and it's beyond us. Maybe approach them. And when it gets to that institution, maybe they'll also be able to say, there's nothing we can do, it's now in court. Those are some of the tactics that we can actually make use of, and also to emphasize on our operational independence, which I know many of the anti-corruption agencies enjoy. And as we leverage on our independence in our operations, not just to keep talking about the independence or autonomy that we have, but to actually show it in our deeds. And this we can do by even politely indicating and reminding these politicians that want to interfere with us to say, this is my work now, there is nothing I can do, it's my office, let us do the work. When we get to the end of the investigations or the prosecution, you'll get to be communicated to officially. When we've done all we can, we've investigated efficiently, I want to also encourage fellow prosecutors in the House that then, at that point, we go to court to prosecute. And as a passionate prosecutor, I want to say we go to court to prosecute spiritedly, so that we can send a message to would-be offenders as we fight corruption. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, mentioning media, when I was a young police officer, I didn't know what should my attitude be towards the media. Then I met an experienced journalist who told me the following. He said, Drago, media is like a crocodile. You have to feed them, but you don't like them. Céline, PNF was established not so many years ago, and as such you were forced to break the ice in many different areas. What would you say were the most significant obstacles you faced in these areas, and how did you overcome them to get to where we are today?
Yes, indeed, PNF is a very recent prosecution service. It was established only 10 years ago. We are having this year our 10 years anniversary, and it was more precisely established in February 2014. At the time, there was only a very small team of 5 prosecutors with very limited resources, and they had to build a team, a bigger team, find resources. And let me tell you that only 7 days after the PNF was established, we received a very sensitive alert about suspicions that a former president of France had corrupted a prosecutor working at the Supreme Court of France in order to obtain a favorable decision in a litigation it was involved in. So
that's a nice way to start.
Yes. 7 days after the creation of
nice
the PNF.
Way to start.
I think the prosecutor at the head of the PNF was very puzzled. And also, this case was a very difficult one because the alert came from telephone tapping, and it was discussions between a former president and his lawyer. So many difficult legal issues, a very sensitive situation, and it was decided, and I think it was brave, to start an investigation. And only 3 years after that, during a campaign for the presidency in France in 2017, there were like press release about, again, probity, we would say, more or less scandal to become. It was about a former prime minister, this time of France, having employed his wife when he was a member of the parliament, but without giving her any job to do. So it was a case of embezzlement of public funds, and again, with a short team, we had to take a difficult decision. Would we take this case, begin an investigation between a campaign, and we decided to do so. And we investigated and we prosecuted in those 2 cases. And let me tell you that I think that the first challenge that the PNF had to encounter was to obtain convictions in these 2 cases, because we had been criticized in being politically motivated, in difficult situations with legal issues. And, well, in fact, we, in those 2 cases, obtained convictions. And beside that, it was also very important that we were able to start and obtain results in less sensitive cases, in more consensual situations, such as international corruption. I must say it's more consensual. In corruption related to the action of criminal organizations. And so we also opened investigations in those fields, and we had the chance of getting new tools to conduct our investigations and to conclude them. It was in 2016 a very important law in France, the loi Sapin II. And in this law, basically, and the most important, was that was introduced in France a tool that is the equivalent of the deferred prosecution agreement in the United States. And so with this tool and other tools that were created by the legislator, we had the possibility to end our cases, our investigations in an acceptable time period, because it was a criticism that was made to the French authorities. Our investigations were much too long. 10 years to investigate international corruption. All our counterparts, all our foreign partners had finished their own investigations long before us. So with this framework that was established, I think that we were in a position to have good results, and I might talk to you about it a bit later.
Okay, thank you. As I said, a very nice case to start with, you know. Veronica, becoming the chief of the Anti-Corruption Prosecution Office in the Republic of Moldova after serving as the US federal prosecutor in Los Angeles, California, is a big change. Could you please tell us what are the biggest differences, let's say, between being a prosecutor in a highly developed country like the United States and developing country like Moldova? For sure, we're facing many, many challenges now.
We do indeed face many challenges, I think, in countries small and big. The thing that I have been struck by is actually how many similarities there are in the different systems. First and foremost, the similarities of the way the criminals think. the types of methodologies they use to perpetrate their corruption schemes. For example, having family members deposit cash, opening offshore companies in the names of close friends and associates. Those were things that I saw as a prosecutor in the United States and things that we see in the Republic of Moldova as well. The challenges we face, especially in more recent years, are similar on a grander scale. For example, in my career as a prosecutor in the United States, I handled an investigation that ended in trial convictions of several people involved in a bribery scheme wherein foreign citizens were making illegal campaign donations to U.S. Politicians. In that case, it was Chinese nationals making illegal campaign donations to local politicians in Los Angeles to be able to build high-rise buildings. In Moldova, we are currently investigating illegal campaign financing from Russia, money coming from Russia to influence the political democratic process in the Republic of Moldova that stabilizes our country and the principles we all stand for. The biggest differences I've seen in my work as a prosecutor is Moldova, being a much smaller country, is that much more dependent on and interconnected with other jurisdictions. Almost all of our corrupt actors use foreign bank accounts, offshore companies. Many of our citizens have dual citizenship with Romania, with Russia, and other countries. And so we as a country, different from the United States, are almost always dependent on other jurisdictions to gather evidence. We're reliant on systems such as INTERPOL to find our fugitives abroad. We are dependent on each different jurisdiction's extradition legal basis and sets of laws, which makes it much more challenging to investigate these complex schemes. The other similarity that I've noticed between our countries, the United States, where I practice, in Moldova, and as we sit here on this stage, I hear it from our panelists as well, from in terms of attacks against the rule of law that we've seen a lot more, including in big countries and small. Rhetoric that a valid prosecution that is based on evidence and law is actually just a political persecution, a witch hunt. Those are things that we're hearing in the United States from powerful politicians. Those are things we very often hear from Moldovan politicians as well. The biggest difference that I've noticed between these two systems is how resilient each system is to withstanding such attacks. I think the United States, having the history that it does, has built trust for its justice system, for its rule of law. So even when it starts being attacked, I think it is one that's much more resilient than the Republic of Moldova, a very young democracy where unfortunately we've had a dark past in terms of abuses by the justice system, failures by the justice system. It's very difficult. I think we all on the stage would agree that it's difficult to gain public trust, but very easy to lose it. And one of my appeals to this group that has gathered here today, and in particular to investigative journalists, to members of civil society, to the donor community, is to emphasize how critical it is to build and maintain the public's trust in the justice system and in the rule of law. I think that means encouraging prosecutors and judges that are doing their job in really difficult circumstances, investing in those systems so that people have hope, have optimism when it comes to democracy and what it has to offer for all of us. And on that note of optimism and hope, I'm very proud to say that the Republic of Moldova in the last 2 years, its ranking in Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index has gone up 29 places. So we're working hard in Moldova to establish a stable rule of law. We still have a lot of work to do, but hopefully we achieve those goals.
Thank you. Catherine, as the Europol's boss, you're the best qualified to tell us what are the main challenges of today's policing. Is police sufficiently equipped to access and process the data it needs for an investigation, or do you need more?
Thank you, and thank you for having me here today. I am indeed the director of the European Law Enforcement Agency, and in our mandate, we support the member states' law enforcement community in the investigations against serious and organized crime and terrorism. And policing is nowadays, the big challenge for us is the availability of the data to the law enforcement community and the lawful access to data. The availability of the data, we see that we have a lot of legal changes globally and also in the European Union, and we have a lot of technological developments. And these two, they bring for the law enforcement community a new challenge, and that is the new data sets we have to receive and we have to process. We receive data from social media companies. We receive data from messaging apps. We receive data related to crypto money, cryptocurrencies. And as a law enforcement community, we have to adapt ourselves to have access to that data and to process that data. So, and that is really a challenge. For us, the police community, it's the biggest challenge nowadays. The second big issue we have and challenge we have to overcome is to have access to digital data in foreign parts of the world. It takes a lot of time. We have different legal systems, and to have access to digital evidence and to digital data is becoming more and more difficult for the law enforcement community. And it's very difficult because you need this data to solve your case and to bring perpetrators before court. So this demands for international police cooperation. We also are vocal on having legal frameworks that take this issue into account. And we see that we have some legal developments. For instance, in the European Union, we will have the E-Evidence Act and Pact, which we welcome very much because this will allow us to access digital data within the digital environment. The third big challenge is end-to-end encryption. Law enforcement community, justice authorities, we are all confronted with the decision of companies and hosting online providers to upgrade the cybersecurity element. And it means that they choose for end-to-end encryption of a lot of the messaging possibilities they did develop over the years. It is a choice made by the online service providers and by the company themselves. For the law enforcement community, it brings a lot of challenges with it. Because before, we could go to a company, to an online service provider, to ask for real-time data related to suspects with a judicial request, with the necessary safeguards in place. And the technological companies were capable to foresee us with this data. Nowadays, because of the choice for end-to-end encryption, lawful access to data really becomes an issue. And we see more and more that technology is not longer serving us, but technology is ruling us. And private companies sometimes have the will to have this in place because it generates profits and it so-called enhances privacy for the users of the technology, but also our victims. And the criminal cases we are responsible for need to have an answer. And finding this answer and trying to solve the case is becoming more and more difficult. That is why the European police chiefs and the chief of the UK police, we all agreed on a common declaration related to the problem of end-to-end encryption, because we start from the idea that it's a common responsibility for the private sector and for us, for the law enforcement community. We believe that effective law enforcement and effective investigations, that it goes hand in hand with protection of the privacy of the citizens. We have a shared goal, and also private companies need to take up their social responsibility and give a clear answer when there is a request from a law enforcement authority, from a justice authority, to have access to criminal data that is shared through these platforms and communication possibilities of the private companies. We need to have technical, operational, and legal solutions to this. This is our request towards political authorities. We need to have the right legal framework to be sure that we are covered, that enough safeguards are in place, but that law enforcement is capable to continue to do its work, because now it is at stake, and at one moment in time we could go blind if we do not take the right measures at the moment. Technical solutions, operational solutions, and a good legal framework. We advocate for that, and we need this for the future to overcome our challenges. Thank you.
Thank you. So I hope you see the setting. You see, we have 5 strong ladies and 2 strong men. We were thinking to put one of them in the middle of the ladies, but that would be, we would make him feel lonely. So now we go to the 2 strong men, and we move from the European Police Organization to the World Police Organization, Interpol. Isaac, as global criminal police organization, Interpol is highly dependent on effective but also fair cooperation of member states. What is happening with this cooperation today? You know, you're facing circumstances like war in Ukraine, Middle East, and so on. Do the countries still want to talk to each other? Or maybe they're even trying to use this cooperation to achieve some other goals? How do you cope with these challenges nowadays?
Thank you. I will start by saying that Interpol, as an international, the only international police organization that has existed for over a period of 100 years, has not and will not reduce its activities to domestic and international politics going around. And what do I mean by that? This is an organization that stood the test of time, and in the past, the organization started with just 20 member countries about 100 years ago. Down the line, Interpol has 196 member countries today. What this suggests to us is that the relevance, the significance, the contribution, the need for Interpol to assist to support member countries is becoming increasingly important today. Of course, we are not discounting the fact that there are some geopolitical conflicts here and there and tension. But the key thing is that this has not stopped criminals from practicing or perpetuating their criminal enterprise. This is exactly where Interpol comes to it. The mandate of Interpol has essentially got nothing to do with the geopolitics, with the geopolitical politics, but with helping supporting country to be able to curtail organized crimes and all the crime associated with it in a way that will make country and the world safer, more secure, more peaceful. Of course, chances are that countries do make mistakes, and sometimes attempts could be made by country to weaponize corporations, but Interpol, having been existing for the past 100 years, has built a lot of very stringent, strict buffers against some of these things. And I will say that over the years, Interpol has come up with 4 solid platforms through which countries will make it very difficult for countries, if not completely impossible, for countries to weaponize a corporation. And I begin by saying, when we know the way Interpol works, we will understand that at what we call Notice and Diffusion Task Force, which of course is a team, independent team, set up by Interpol to ensure that there is quality and legal compliance that country must comply with in order to be able to publish their notices, Otherwise, such notice will not be published. So what we're preparing, what we had in mind by setting up this task force is to prevent a situation whereby country will use or leverage on Interpol service system to be able to do what is untoward toward another country or other region and all of that. Another system that Interpol has put in place is Commission for Control of Interpol Files. What that means is that it's an independent body as well that Interpol put in place to ensure that all personal data, we deal with police data, over billions of police data with which we connect countries in our 196 member countries. What we do is to ensure that personal data are processed in accordance with our rule of processing data, RPD. We have very stringent, strict, enduring rule for processing data that countries, no matter how influential that country may appear to be, cannot just undermine it just to do what is untoward to other countries. What this speaks essentially is that over the years, Interpol has maintained its neutrality regardless of the geopolitical conflicts going around and will continue to do that. The hallmark, the centrality of our strength deals or depends on neutrality, and when you look at Article 3 of Interpol, it forbids Interpol from involving or engaging on any activities of a political character. This is to say that we concentrate our effort more in supporting country by ensuring that crimes and criminalities are dealt with rather than get into the fray of politics going around. And the last thing that Interpol has ensured to defray any potential idea or overture to ensure that the platform is abused is to, from time to time, we have CCC, we have offices, we run 24/7 across the world. 24/7, 7 days in a week, 65 or 66 days, as the case may be, in a year. There is no breathing space of just 30 seconds in a day for any country or any member country or any individual to either misuse or abuse any of the systems to be able to weaponize or to punish or to unduly treat any member country. Of course, like I said, we do acknowledge that country can make mistakes because countries are run by individuals who may either have ulterior motive or want for whatever agenda. Those are the reasons we put those systems in place. In the Interpol silver notice that the infusion that I mentioned, this is the reason why we have a Commission for Control of Interpol Data. This is why we have a very formidable communication system that is impossible for any country to breach. I'm talking about our I-427 communication infrastructure with which we connect countries around the world. So Interpol stands ready. Why we exist is to assist member countries equally, independently, in such a way that we target what our business concerns is, which of course is to support countries to prevent corruption. Of course, we'll continue to enhance the process, but the assurance here is that Interpol, it will be very difficult for any member country to either misuse or to abuse because our neutrality is our unique selling point. Thank you.
Thank you. Now let's move to another international organization, this time to the Organization of Prosecutors. Andrés, how do you explain the fact that in at least some of the European Union countries, your prosecutors, European Public Prosecutor's Office, are considered to be more independent and more autonomous than their national colleagues? I would argue that all prosecutors have to be independent and autonomous. With other words, the added value of the EPPO is clear, but isn't it problematic that the EPPO had to be established to eliminate the challenge faced by the national prosecutors?
Well, thank you very much, Drago, for raising the question. I think it's a very particular matter, which is very dear, actually, to our heart. First of all, of course, thanks a lot for being able to participate at this panel with such exceptional colleagues. And referring to previous experiences you have been talking about, I would say you don't become a prosecutor to be popular. Mm-hmm. You become a prosecutor because you feel a commitment. And that's the point, actually. And you mentioned it as well, that the fact that independence is not just about legal framework. It's about the ethics, it's about the belief in a society, and it's most of all, of course, about resources. And then having the resources is another important point. But to come back to your question, in a way, a little bit provocative question, I must say, whether we consider this as a problem that we were created just in view of problems in the member states. I wouldn't put it this way, but I would consider that independence for a prosecution office is a key condition for it performing its work in the most impartial and effective way to protect society. I mean, we were created to protect European taxpayers' money, but the way that it was created, or the condition which was set, was this absolute independence which is embodied in our founding regulation and which we actually live. To put it perhaps in plain words, what I would say is that if you believe in rule of law, then let the law rule. And let actually act in a way in which everyone is the same before the law. So having said that, what we can establish and what we have established in our operational practice is actually that quite a high number of criminal complaints that they come from private parties. So if we're talking about the last year, year 2023, we received more than 4,000 criminal complaints, around 4,200. And of those, 200, 500, more than half of them, were coming actually for private parties. So what we are talking about is also in enhancing the trust of society in public institutions, in a public prosecution office. And more important even is the fact that if we consider 2022 to 2023, we're in a situation in which the number of cases we initiated from private party complaints, by whistleblowers, if you want, that the number of cases that we initiated from that rose by almost 60%. So this shows actually that if you have an institution which has the independence embodied in itself, that you're in a situation in which you are able to create, to foster, to show that prosecution is being done. And if you're talking about corruption, which is a hidden offense, of course we're very much dependent on people being courageous enough or being willing to actually perform or give this information to law enforcement authorities. So I think this is quite an important aspect. Sorry. To talk about other features which are related to this in EPPO, I would just mention a few of them. And I think that it's very important that you have a specialized prosecution office. I mean, we're a transnational prosecution office, the first in the world, operating in 24 out of the, soon in 24 out of the 27 member states, which makes a lot of things different and easier. But having a specialization is also, I think, a key feature of independence. Because if you're just spreading spreading it around at prosecution officers, which are not specialized, not having the experience, then you're also hampering actually efficient investigations. So then there are all those points like operational features, which be like having access to databases, to which Catherine was referring to, in being able to have the means, the analytical tools. We talked about resources, about how to process it. We have a specialized unit, specialized again, a specialized unit in which we are able to gather, analyze this data, both from the European Union and from national authorities, and actually to support the investigations in those, for the time being, 22, soon 24 participating member states. Since we are a single office, transnational, working all across Europe, this means that we do not need cumbersome, more or less cumbersome legal assistance with regard to our investigations. And then there's a point, of course, that resources will always be scarce if we talk about financial and economic crime. So it's about joining forces. It's about databases, it's about analysis of databases, it's about using AI in a good way. It's about developing these capabilities. And then we're talking about independence again, because giving the means to actually develop this and to develop this kind of strategy is, I think, also a matter of what independence at the end means, which is efficient prosecution. So cooperation is in general in our DNA. You talked about the national prosecution officers. We cooperate with them. So that we are able to provide them also with data coming from our investigations. I would believe that the fact that we have been established, that this is something which might be a help for national prosecution officers as well, that they wouldn't feel alone. And we would take a lot of pride, and our goal would be, at the end of the day, that we would be kind of a role model for the European Union or for prosecution officers. And having said that, this is at the end of the day what we all want to have, like an independent prosecution with no political interferences, who's able to perform its work. Thanks.
Thank you. So now I need you. You see, we have a second set of questions already, but I have the feeling that you might have many questions too. So can you just, those of you who are planning to ask a question, raise your hands, so I would approximately know how many questions you have to answer. Well, there are not so many. Oh yeah, we'll start with questions right away if it's okay with you. And because we will not have the time to go for another round and then answer the questions. So we'll skip the second round. If we will run out of your questions, we'll use mine. So can we get the microphones? I don't see the guys with microphones. I see the hands. I don't see the microphones. Okay, Lisa, then while we're waiting to get the microphones to be there with you, first question to you for the second round, but try to be as short as possible.
Okay.
Let's say US is very efficient due to the very broad jurisdictional rules, which many of the people present here do not know exactly. How can you explain to us how do your jurisdictional rules work? And do you think that the introduction of broad or even broader jurisdictional rules can stimulate international cooperation against corruption?
Short answer, yes. End of answer. Okay. I'll elaborate a little bit, but be brief. So I think the reason the answer is yes is because broad jurisdictional rules in countries across the world leave cross-border criminals fewer places to hide, and dual criminality is certainly a very good thing for international enforcement of anti-corruption laws. In the United States, we have 5 statutes that have broad but not unlimited jurisdiction that we regularly use as tools. The FCPA, which I mentioned earlier, creates jurisdiction over 3 categories of people: issuers of securities, including foreign companies, domestic concerns, which mean basically individuals or companies in the US. And then we also have a territorial jurisdiction provision, it's called in that statute, where even if the actors involved are not issuers of securities or domestic concerns, if they say are on vacation in Miami and talk about facilitating bribes, we've got jurisdiction because it's in the territory of the United States. For issuers of domestic concerns, while those concepts sound like they must occur in the United States, that's not necessarily true. The hook there has to be use of the mails or any means or instrumentality of interstate commerce, which is quite a broad concept. It can include emails, text messages, and payments through US financial systems. In addition to these anti-bribery provisions, we also have accounting provisions in the FCPA, and that can provide jurisdiction over, for example, foreign subsidiaries of companies. They book bribe payments as consulting fees and inaccurately certify if they're public companies. We get jurisdiction there. Second thing, a corollary to the FCPA, a new tool called FIPA, the Foreign Extortion Prevention Act. This now criminalizes what we call the demand side of bribery, foreign officials who demand bribe payments, whereas the FCPA prohibits the other side of the transaction. So this is a new tool we're very excited about. Third, we have money laundering statutes that we use to great avail and used before FIPA to hold foreign officials accountable for bribery offenses. And their extraterritoriality applies if the transaction involved or a series of transactions are over $10,000. And if the laundering is by a US citizen or if by a foreign national, the conduct occurs in part in the United States. I would emphasize that our money laundering statutes are based upon underlying specified unlawful activity, which is basically a long list of crimes, but a jurisdictional hook there that we use a lot in the corruption space is foreign commercial bribery. So the second part of your question, the more countries across the world that pass commercial bribery prohibitions, the more it amplifies the jurisdiction of the US money laundering statutes. And then final few things to emphasize, we also use a statute known as the Travel Act. We use it domestically in racketeering prosecutions, but we also use it in our foreign corruption cases to pursue offenders. It provides jurisdiction over people who travel in interstate or foreign commerce, which is commonly done in connection with bribery schemes, or if they use the mail or any facility in interstate or foreign commerce with the intent to distribute proceeds of a specified unlawful activity, again, could include foreign bribery offenses, or otherwise promote, manage, or carry on such activity. And that's not it. We also have potential tax liability and wire fraud, mail fraud, and bank fraud. So it's a broad toolkit, but not an unlimited toolkit. And I would say it amplifies the success of other statutes, such as that mentioned by Céline in France and our colleagues in the UK and elsewhere.
No, I'm sure that many countries would like to have such jurisdictions as rules too. Okay, we got the microphone. So the lady over here, the first one, just right from you. Can you just please tell us who you are and, if possible, whom you are asking the question?
My name is Alina Radu. I am an investigative reporter from Moldova, and my question is about ending impunity in Moldova. We have a big problem with ending impunity with the help of international institutions, and some of the representatives are on the stage. Last days we had a big scandal in the country about Interpol. There is an investigation against Interpol Moldova, who prevented for years and years that Moldovan fugitive oligarchs are put in the system and are officially wanted. So this is a big shame for the system, and I was looking for any explanation from Interpol, and there is nothing. I even checked the Interpol web page before this session, didn't find any name of Plahotniuc, Shor, and other oligarchs. You know what did I found? A name of a woman about whom I published an investigation 25 years ago. 25 years, guys, nobody looked for that person, nobody found her, nobody knows if she is alive, and I suppose she is not because she was part of the larger mafia and she might be killed, but who cares? That page of Interpol is like a monument of somebody doing nothing. I speak about Moldovan part. Now my question is to Mr. Isaac. I know he might not be aware about this problem because there are hundreds of countries in the world and thousands of fugitives, but please, can you promise to do a kind of investigation about integrity issue related to this problem and publish next day a press release about what happens related to Interpol Moldova office? And my question is to Veronica, our head chief of anti-corruption prosecutor. If by hope and by chance Interpol does something and they bring to Moldova fugitive oligarchs, can we be sure that we manage to end impunity and to put them in jail, and what do we need for that? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, this is, let's say, it's not very common that we would discuss concrete cases during such conferences, but this is an exception because it shows maybe a systematic problem. So, Isaac, would you please try to answer the question? Of course, Veronica, you're next then.
Yeah. Thank you. I will start by saying that a few weeks ago, there was an attempt to block, I'm aware, you know, that's why I'm saying this. There was an attempt to block and delete some notices in Moldova that's connected to Moldova. We got hold of that, and Interpol was able to report that matter to Moldovan authority. In addition to doing that, reports were made to French authority. As we are all aware, Interpol headquarters is located in France. And we are happy to know, perhaps the questionnaire might not have the current development, but I really appreciate the fact that she raised a very good question, and I could see the passion with which she asked the question. The point is that Interpol has 19 databases. Like I said, Interpol work 24/7 a week, 365 days a year. We have regional bureau, we have NCB in 196 countries, we have regional bureau, we have liaison offices and some other things. It is practically impossible for Interpol not to be on top of any of its situations. Like I did say the other time, countries, individuals do make mistakes. But where you determine the strength of Interpol is how Interpol, the swiftness with which Interpol reacts to any of the attempts for anybody to do something untoward. And the case of Moldova came to mind when Interpol was able to discover that there was an attempt by certain individuals who wanted to block or delete some publication relating to some fugitives. And I'm very happy to say that upon reporting that matter to Moldovan authority, those individuals arrests were made. They did not only make arrests, Interpol ensured that there was a stoppage towards blocking or deleting those notices. And another thing I want to say, which I mentioned before, Interpol has two formidable processes and mechanisms from preventing, often used to prevent any of these things. We have Notice and Diffusion Task Force, which responsibility essentially is to ensure the quality and legal compliance with the way our databases and the use of our system or notices systems are used, thus making it practically impossible for any country or any individual to have their way. What we are talking about is not about intent. People make attempt to kill people, people make attempt to steal. The point is that it's the responsibility of law enforcement agencies to be able to track them down, prevent them, and this is what Interpol has done in this situation. And I'm happy my colleague is on the seat. If given opportunity, she would attest. I'm sure she should be aware, and in case she's not aware, it is there. It was reported in the paper, the swift reaction and how Interpol dealt with this situation. And of course, we can all attest to the fact there is hardly any country or any region, don't let me say any country because we have 196 countries, any region that Interpol has not made arrest or has not supported country in either arresting fugitives who are running for laws or for prosecution or who have done one thing or the other. So we have all felt the impact of Interpol one way or the other. Of course, individuals want to do what is unusual, but the reaction of Interpol consistently over the last 100 years has been to prevent people from doing such. And this takes me to the final point I want to make, neutrality of Interpol in all situations. Article 3 is very clear. Article 3 of Interpol Constitution is very clear. We are forbidden from being neutral, and we are forbidden to take any step or intervention of any political character. When certain issues are happening, it might be happening at the national level, but of course, when Interpol gets wind or becomes aware of it, we ensure that those individuals or even entities do not have their way. And we have not seen those instances. The case she mentioned was an attempt to block and delete, and we got wind of it. We reported to the Moldovan authority and the French authority. Arrests were made, and we ensure complete stoppage of the blockage and the deletion of those notices. Thank you.
I think the lady said that she checked the website just before this panel. So, but I would suggest, if it's possible, of course, Isaac, that you discuss this later on bilaterally.
No, of course.
No, we don't have to do it now.
We would.
Yeah. I think the problem is something else.
we will take it further. That is our job. We support member countries, and we are glad to do that.
Thank you.
So thank you for the question, please. Thank you.
Veronica, short, please.
Yes, thank you for the question. I will emphasize what Isaac said as well. I think the main point is that this scheme was stopped. So the reaction was swift from Interpol when they had an internal investigation. I think in some ways, although we are at the early stages of a criminal investigation, this is a testament of how well international cooperation can work. The Moldovan authorities, together with the French authorities, signed a joint investigation team agreement on the Eurojust platform. We had assistance from both UK and US authorities in executing search warrants. And the most important thing is this scheme was stopped, and it can no longer be used to perpetrate the harm that was done so far. Of course, the important part as well is to have some type of finality in the case. We have the responsibility to move as quickly as possible. I think we have a duty to communicate publicly about things that are of public interest, such as this case. And one thing I'd like to emphasize is the very important and crucial role of prosecutors and judges in being able to deliver that finality. No one else can send people to prison. No one else can actually confiscate assets other than prosecutors and judges. And we've heard today from other speakers how important the independence of prosecutors and the judiciary is in being able to do our work. And we rely on all of you who are here in the room to support us in that mission, to be independent, to be courageous, to bring cases against people in power, against people that have many resources. Of course, valid criticism, constructive criticism is welcome when we make mistakes, but I would also ask that we have the support of civil society, of journalists, of donors in empowering prosecutors and judges to do their jobs.
Just behind you, gentlemen.
Hi, I'm Emin Husseinov, exile-based anti-corruption and human rights activist. My question is related with prevention and enforcement on very well-known cases in Azerbaijan. Billions of money laundering happened for the last 15 years. Recent huge scandal with the Danske Bank. Most of you familiar with this case, $250 billion laundered by Estonian branch. US Treasury Department, Justice Department, Security Exchange Commissions start case, investigate. Bank find themselves guilty, paid 2.2 billion fine. But in Azerbaijan, all banks who transfer $3 billion via 16,000 transactions, several banks, were identified, most of them have a close ties with the ruling family, ruler of Azerbaijan, which is staying in the power last 21 years, Ilham Aliyev, and previously his father stayed. No one in Azerbaijan investigated. We address during the Atlanta meetings, we met with the Azerbaijani officials. They say, for guys, why are you not going to investigate these 5 banks, which is there transfers this money? Investigation happened in Estonia, in Denmark, in EU, in US, in other jurisdictions, many cases in UK, under unexplained wealth orders. We have 5 cases, which is total amount of this corrupt assets like more than £1 billion. No one doing anything in Azerbaijan, but these banks still using SWIFT. They are using their foreign correspondent banks in New York, in the Frankfurt, and bank regulators didn't do anything with this bank. And say, for guys, these banks operating still via your financial institutions. We are talking about enforcement. Enforcement happened in the US jurisdictions, but in the country of origin, nothing happened. How is it possible to stop this and end this impunity? Thank you.
Well, thank you. See, this is the question which no one from the panel can answer. First of all, this is a question for the Azerbaijani authorities. And meanwhile, we were talking, I checked with, let's say, with Lisa, who is from the US, if maybe this is the case where they're working on it, and then the answer was no. So I'm afraid we will not be able to answer this question. We agree with you. This is outrageous. It should not happen. but let's hope that at least some of the agencies in the countries which you mentioned are working on them, if Azerbaijani authorities will not do something by themselves. Next question. Gentleman over there with the pen.
Hi there, Martin Dimitrov, Bulgarian journalist and researcher of anti-corruption. I have a question for Ms. Dragalin again, and it's actually two questions. Let's start with the first one, which is what motivated you to come back to your home country, having a successful career in the States? And the second one is something that I'm interested in from a research perspective. What kind of atmosphere did you encounter in the National Anti-Corruption Commission when you arrived, and what sort of changes did you have to implement to, I guess, change this atmosphere? Because this institution, as far as I know, existed from 2002, and nobody really heard about it for a while before you came in. So yeah, if you can elaborate a bit on this. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I think what motivated me is probably what motivated every person on this stage, which is wanting to do something that has an impact in our local communities, in our broader communities, wanting to serve the public. And unfortunately, I wish that prosecutors and judges had more motivators, that we had better salaries, better working condition, better incentives to want to do this work. I think in large part we rely on a sense of patriotism. That's what we want from our prosecutors, from our judges, to do it for the good of the country. But I think if we as countries invested more in these professions, we would have a lot more return on those investments, because as I mentioned, we're the ones that can confiscate the billions of dollars and actually send people to prison. For me, having grown up in Moldova as a young child, I saw acts of corruption that were systemic and common, such as getting pulled over and being asked for a bribe instead of paying a ticket. Those were things that were very common 20 years ago in Moldova. I think it's not as common nowadays, but corruption was very much a problem. It's what motivated me to become an anti-corruption prosecutor in the United States before taking this opportunity to come back to help my country. What I found when I got there at the Anti-Corruption Prosecution Office, I was very impressed and continue to be very proud of the mostly very young prosecutors that are working there. It's, I would say, a new generation of prosecutors that have dedicated their careers. They are very well prepared. They have been trained and benefited from exchanges of experience, including with many of the jurisdictions that are here in this room. I've tried to come with new ideas from the system that I worked in the United States, promoting cooperation plea agreements, promoting other types of efficient ways to resolve cases. But in large part, I've been very impressed by my colleagues that I work with. And as I mentioned, we have a lot of work left to do, but hopefully it's something that will have more concrete results, because the expectations are certainly very high in our country.
Thank you. You see, person at the top, it's important. There's another hand just behind you. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Juliana Breno. I am the Regional Compliance Officer for Schneider Electric. So my question is, and before, I'd like to say that I believe and I trust the system, and I trust deeply on the work that you guys do. So my question is related to, yesterday we had a testimony of the traumatic experience of Jonathan Taylor, that he was a whistleblower, and how this situation, a whistleblower of SBM offshore in the context of the car wash operation. So, and being a whistleblower had a very devastating impact on his personal life. So it was back in 2012, 2013. So in the context, and I'm not talking about the specific case, I'm talking about how the legislations, whistleblowing legislations, US, Europe, could have been a positive impact or on his experience, if it was today, like how different his experience would be if these legislations would be effective or active when he whistled the blow. Thank you. When he blew the whistle. Thank you.
Thank you. So you didn't tell us who we were asking. Any volunteers?
I can just say a general matter without commenting on a specific experience, but just I will put in a plug for, I do think that we have excellent whistleblower protection laws in the United States and are looking to even further expand them. They've been a huge part of the success of our regulatory programs in the United States as well as our criminal system.
Thank you. So let's move to this. Or there's a lady over there, just behind you again. And then we'll move to this side if there are any questions. Please.
Hi, hello. I'm Natalia Jovanovic, reporter based in Belgrade. I have a question for Europol, maybe about the body of evidence that was collected after the breakup of Sky, ACC, and EncroChat. So how is this evidence distributed to Western Balkans, and maybe some challenges regarding that? Do you see some efforts for joint investigation in this area? How is it coming along?
Just, Catherine, before answering, this is not a press conference. That'll be the answer to the question, but don't expect that you will get the answer. We should conserve this as a, let's say, usually as a press conference question. Catherine.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. In Europol, we do not have executive powers. So the member states, the 27 of the European Union, and our partner countries always remain the owner of the data they share with Europol. At Europol, we provide them with a platform of police cooperation. With expertise, we can do the cooperation. The cooperation within the European Union is very simple. It's a complete information exchange according to the laws. We are at Europol responsible to support for serious and organized crime and terrorism. So in most of the cases, we have already prosecutors in place that in the home countries are responsible for the prosecution. And at European level, we have the so-called joint investigation teams, where you bring the different prosecutors and law enforcement agencies together to decide upon the cases. When we look at the Western Balkan countries, we have with all the Western Balkan countries operational agreements except with Kosovo. An operational agreement, that means that we have the possibility to immediately exchange personal data with the Western Balkan countries if they are deemed to be necessary in an operational case with the member states. So in serious and organized crime investigations, when we talk about Sky, CC, EncroChat, Firefly, we always had at least 2 countries from the European soil together with countries from the Western Balkan countries when we saw that there was a link to the cases, to the basic case in the European Union. So in fact, with the Western Balkan countries, they are very close to the European Union. There are operational agreements in place, so we can exchange data. The cooperation went very smoothly, but it's, for instance, those who are in charge of the basic case in the Union, like France, the Netherlands, and Belgium, for instance, the prosecutors and the law enforcement community over there, they decide what Europol can share with the Western Balkan countries.
Thank you. This part?
Thank you. My name is Professor M.T. Ladan from Nigeria. All the panelists made reference to the challenge of information sharing, international cooperation, and I would like to ask the panelists that in ending impunity from prevention to enforcement, we have only the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, UNCAC, as the only legally binding international treaty that made reference to information exchange, international cooperation, and then it gave a role to law enforcement. So my question to the panelists, how relevant is the UNCAC to your work? And what is the level of compliance within your organizations or within your national jurisdiction with UNCAC provisions that has to do with law enforcement, international cooperation, information exchange? Thank you.
Volunteers?
Let me just...
You can also...
thank you, Professor Ladan from Nigeria. He's a respectable professor from Nigeria, so I'm not surprised that he has that brilliant question, just like the first woman who asked me a question. The point is that today, UNCAC remains the gold standard in the context of international legal instruments guiding international cooperation. There is hardly any organization, particularly international organizations, I'm talking in the context of Interpol, UN agencies, that do not, in a way, implement the letter and the content of UNCAC. So it's irrelevant, as far as, permit me to say in quote, is the ground norm as far as international legal instrument relating to international cooperation, and it's a leading standard, even in asset recovery when you look at Article 4, Article 5. As a matter of fact, entire article of UNCAC is dedicated to asset recovery. And when we are talking about asset recovery, there is hardly any way you can do that without international cooperation, particularly in the context of offshore or international asset recovery, which moves beyond border and some other things. Some of us are very privy and we know what happened in Abacha loot case in Nigeria, who Abacha, the late military dictator, who was alleged to have stolen about 5 billion, and as at last count, about 4.1 billion was recovered. I'm talking about offshore. Some of these funds, all of these 5 billions were actually moved in different jurisdictions across the world, and it was as a result of cooperation with countries, with France, with US, and some other country, and some tax haven country, that some of these funds were able to be recovered. This couldn't have been possible without international cooperation, and this couldn't have been possible without a legal instrument in the form of UNCAC, providing a platform for countries to warm themselves to Nigeria to be able to sit on the round table to discuss that. I'm saying this because I was part of the Nigerian delegation at that time to GIFA, Global Forum on Asset Recovery, and I was part of the people that reviewed, the memorandum of understanding between World Bank, Nigeria, and the Swiss authority, which led to the recovery of 321 million in 2027. This was essentially made possible because UNCAC provided opportunities, made provision for this. So essentially, in a nutshell, is the benchmark that all other legislations of a lower status will have to benchmark, will have to struggle to meet up with, meaning that UNCAC is relevant as far as my organization is concerned, and I believe the same hold true because it provides a platform and it's being referenced in some of the other regional and international organizations we have. Thank you.
Céline, you wanted to add something?
Yes, just a few words maybe. As part of the European Union, France has the chance to be able to benefit from a framework that is very facilitating in the field of cooperation. UNCAC, I think, is a good framework to enable cooperation with, as far as France is concerned, to cooperate with counterparts, partners that are sometimes very far from us and very different, like they have different legal systems, we don't work the same way. So it's important to have this general framework, but we all know that in practice, treaties, conventions are not enough, and we have to know each other. There has to be will in different countries to cooperate. And coming back to what Veronica was saying a few minutes ago, I think that what happened in Moldova 2 weeks ago, it was the result of a strong cooperation between France, between Moldova, between the United States, between the UK, and I think it's not a shame that such an operation happened in Moldova. This case isn't a Moldovan case, in fact, but I won't say more. It's a chance that we were able with Veronica Dragalin to build such a strong cooperation. It's a very limited period, only a few weeks, and that we could obtain such a good results.
Thank you. So, you see, when we started, I said we will hear today what the law enforcement needs to fight corruption effectively. And I have to admit, I was expecting to hear resources, staff, equipment, powers. No. What we heard was the following: will, ethics, independence, impartiality, desire. And this is, and I will just repeat what Lisa said at the beginning, where's the will, there's the way. When I got the list of speakers for this plenary session, I said, oh my, you know, those are all top guys, you know, we will speak highly theoretical issues. But you could see, those are all guys who either were or still are in trenches fighting corruption. And I think we can trust them. We can trust them that they will do whatever is in their powers to get to the situation which Andrés has nicely explained. He said, if we speak about the rule of law, then let the law rule. Let's give them applause. They deserve it.
Thank you very much. I would really add that there was a lot of enthusiasm and passion, and there was some tension in this panel, which is always good. It always adds to the vibrant dynamics of any panel discussion. So it was really good. Thank you very, very much. The plenary was initiated by the STT, the Lithuanian Special Investigation Services. Thank you to all of those who attended, all of the participants as well. There is a full agenda packed with workshops because here to this venue, we will come back only at 4:30, that's in 2 hours, for the final plenary session of today. For now, do enjoy the workshops, coffee breaks. The coffee or a tea break is at 4, and do enjoy all of the content that happens in this conference, and thank you so much for being such a good audience with so many good questions. Thank you.